right. We're back. There is no script here. If you're anything like me, the last week has really been painful to watch the news unfolding, abroad in Israel, and to see the photos and the it just felt like over the course of like the first few days, it just kept getting worse and worse. We just we knew what Hamas was capable of, but I think we actually had to see it for ourselves for it to finally hit us. Holy, holy shit. I really, I don't normally swear, but it's, these people are fucking monsters, honestly. And,
Mm-hmm.
it takes a war like that for me to use language like that, just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you know, what I've seen in, it's really upsetting, but also to see the unity and the solidarity that the Jewish
I
people have
mean,
for each other. It's been inspiring, and it's been light through what has been a very dark week. And joining me for her debut on the podcast to discuss all this with me is Sara, known as LittleBigMouth. Thank you for joining me.
thank you so much, Jonathan. It took a while for me to get on here, lots of things going on, but it's now it's the time we have to speak out. And I am so grateful that you want to give my voice this platform, share your platform with me. Thank you so much.
Right. I guess what I want to do is like maybe, you know, follow the natural progression of what like a Shiva would look like, starting with the negative, moving to the ending with the
Mm,
positive. Uh,
100%, 100%. Amen. Yes.
I just I when I first heard the news, this was on, I had just gone to shul that morning. Someone
Mm,
who, who's not Shomer Shabbos, but who has a son who was called up in Israel.
yeah.
That's how I first heard about it. I imagine many in my
Yeah.
community heard about it the same way. I have to admit, my first reaction was, even they can't be that stupid.
Yeah.
You know,
I think a lot of us thought that. And I would take that even further. And a lot of us thought, okay, now the world's going to see that Hamas is Daesh. Hamas is the Taliban. Hamas is Iran. Hamas is sociopathic. We all thought this. And for a glimmer, it seemed like that was the case. And then immediately, it was dropped. Our humanity was minimized and it was hijacked. What has happened, and it went back to same old, same old. And I have to say, as disheartening as this is, and actually this is in a greater scale than what I'm about to compare it to, um, it reminded me of how I felt after the Tree of Life attacks, because it was the same different in that when Tree of Life happened, I, as a left-wing Democrat, and we can discuss that later on, how I'm actually more centrist than I used to be. As a left-wing Democrat, I thought my fellow lefties, Democrats, social justice people, etc., would finally get that anti-Semitism is deadly and it didn't start and end with the Shoah and it's long-tailed, and they finally would understand that our warnings were not paranoia as the anti-Semitic trope, like tell the world we're neurotic. And I thought finally, and right after it happened, same story. It was minimized. It was used to say, look how privileged the Jews are that everyone's talking about this. and no one's talking about X, Y, and Z, and the whole thing all over again. So on the one hand, it isn't new, and there was something inside of me that thought maybe it would once again be minimized. This isn't new. I guess Tree of Life kind of prepared me for it. But this isn't such a grander scale. It is in such a more devastating scale because, and I hate to say this, because the shooting at the Tree of Life was devastating and horrific and psychopathic. But this is beyond. This is beyond. This is, and I'm not going to go into graphic details. We all know what has happened, the absolute carnage and torture and of the babies.
Yeah.
We all know this. So this is beyond, but it is with a known terrorist organization practicing the same brutality that we have seen in Syria, that we have seen in Afghanistan, and numerous other places. And suddenly, because it's Jews, and by the way, it isn't only Jews, but suddenly because it's Jews, it's excusable.
Yeah. You've mentioned some, the data that you don't want to go into. I'm going to probably just mention, for those of you who don't know, the attack on the first day by Hamas, the deaths of Jews from that first day of the attack is the largest number of Jews killed in a single incident since the Shoah.
Since the Shoah.
Yeah.
Since the Shoah.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that there haven't been grand scale attacks since the Shoah and during the Shoah in the Middle East, because we all know about the Farhut, which, for those who don't know about it, happened in Iraq. It was an ethnic cleansing. It was brutality. Just like this, the numbers were smaller. But we also know about the complete violence that caused the ethnic cleansing of 850,000 Jews who had been living all around the Middle East and North Africa, Swana region, since antiquity.
Yeah.
Because they were Jews.
Yeah, and that's not to mention the wide scale forced exodus of Jews from across the Middle East, North Africa, not just from Iraq, but like Libya, Yemen.
Yes, exactly. Who have none of these, all these countries have virtually no Jews left. All of them. The attack, and I think this brings me to actually the crux of what I am struggling with right now. Well, there are so many things I'm struggling with, but let me put it this way. Me, as someone who has so long had left-wing values, my family, we are Democrats, never GOP. People can get angry at me, whatever you want to say. I am now almost politically homeless. But I won't be, obviously I'm an American, I'm living abroad in Europe, but I won't be ever voting GOP because I also see the traditional right-wing anti-Semitism that's enabled there. I don't feel safe. I see what it's doing to so many other minorities. Okay, I'm just putting that aside because that's a whole different discussion. But what I want to say in terms of the crux of, for me, the issue is what's before, and I mean before 2016, Trump's election, when anti-Semitism started really rearing its ugly head on the left. I was neutral about Israel. If you had asked me, what do you think about Israel? My answer would have been, I don't know. I mean, it has a right to exist. I think Netanyahu's an a-hole. I hate that the Palestinians are suffering. And honestly, I don't know much more about it. And I didn't know very much about the history. And I even had grandparents who lived there for many years, family members. I still have family members and they're friends of the family, okay? I was neutral at best. It didn't concern me that much. I grew up in the States. I'm not saying I didn't face anti-Semitism in the States. I'm not saying there weren't issues. My family in the States had to deal with the Red Scare. My own mother was followed by the FBI in that period as a young child and harassed to get information about her parents. It's a scary experience. And I had my own experiences in the States, but in general, I felt safe enough that Israel didn't concern me too much, right? I'm saying this 100% honestly. What changed my whole entire view of the situation was, thank goodness, for the people, the Jewish community in my life who reached out to educate me and taught me about Mina Jews, Mizrahim, Sephardim, Beit Ezraelim, everything they had been experiencing since antiquity due to Pan-Arabism, Dhimmitud, Muslim conquests, jihadism, etc. I suddenly left my bubble of being an Ashkenazim American who did not have to grow up with this, who tragically did have to grow up with the stories of my grandparents in Europe and also what happened in America, but not to the level. My ignorance made me look at Israel as a kind of vacation destination, an option, without any knowledge of the true history. And slowly, thankfully, for my people who took the time to educate me, and by the way, not only the Mina Jewish community in Mizrahim, also Ashkenazim, friends of mine, including Ben Freeman, who I helped edit his book, Jewish Pride. He and many other people in the UK informed me. But because I learned about this, I realized this isn't the story of a vacation destination. This is the story of a homeland and a people who have consistently, we have consistently been displaced and mistreated everywhere we've gone. And anti-Semitism has existed everywhere we've gone, whether it's packaged in far-right European extremism, in Islamist extremism, and some people would even argue, and I'm talking about Muslim or ex-Muslim friends of mine, that just like with Christianity, anti-Semitism is embedded in much of the text. And this wholesale of the far-right European anti-Semitism of Russia and the Soviet Union, under which my grandparents fled, being exported into the MENA, the propaganda such as the protocols being exported to exploit what was already anti-Semitic atmosphere for Jews, being exploited to sell European allyship. And all of this, learning about it, and I'm talking years, and I still don't know half or a quarter, all of this suddenly changed my entire perspective about Israel, about the people in Israel. I am still extremely critical of Netanyahu. That's a whole other discussion. But one thing I can say is there is no doubt in my mind that this is not a territorial dispute. This is a dispute between anti-Semitism and the desire of Jews to live. Period.
I agree. And when it makes the whole political developments, particularly among politicians we thought were allies,
Yes.
so upsetting. I'm actually glad you brought up the Tree of Life Synagogue, because it just so happens that the Tree of Life Synagogue is located in the district of someone who refused to co-sponsor a resolution expressing solidarity with Israel.
Oh my.
Yeah. And there have been, we've seen the statements put out by student organizations like Harvard Law,
Yep.
New York University Law,
Cooney.
all of those places, Stanford, et cetera, et cetera. Even in Canada, York
In
University.
Australia.
Yeah.
In the Netherlands. And this was before this happened. The attempt to infiltrate universities here and give information about quote unquote Jewish organizations, to create a list of Zionist organizations, Zionist with the 3 parentheses around it. Continue. Sorry to interrupt, Jonathan.
Yeah, and to that point, even within my own community of Orthodox Jews, there is this group called the Nature Carta, who are more willing to parrot those same taunts.
Oh my God.
They're basically the Jewish Westboro Baptist Church.
I was just gonna say, being paraded around as if, I love when the non-Jewish world, I love when Goyim did like tokenize the most ridiculous people. And they parade them around like, look, these are quote unquote good Jews. And it's the same as the Yevsektia of the Soviet Union, who were ultimately murdered anyway. The idea that the only Jews people will listen to are the ones who share their worldview. They won't be challenged on it. Yeah, it's crazy.
There's comparisons actually been made to the way, and it pains this is because I know how, that you grew up on the left, and there are people,
and secular as well.
There are people on the left who are behaving right now the way many on the left, I think, behaved when the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was signed. That pact between the Soviet and the Nazis. It was many left-wing people were against going to war with the Nazis because of their alliance with the Soviet Union. It was only once the Nazis turned on the Soviet Union that they became pro-war.
That it became an issue. And actually, that is the story of the Shoah. Honestly, now it's told as if all of these allies went in to save Jews. No. They stumbled upon us, and the horror was so shocking to them. But they were warned.
Yeah, they had intelligence.
Didn't go to save us. The Russians did not come in to save us, but it would look really bad on them if they walked by Treblinka, Sobibor, whatever, and didn't do anything. It would look really bad. Yeah, but this is the repetition. This is the repetition. Our pain and suffering is universalized until it actually happens right now. And then it is diminished, demeaned, and turned on us.
you were mentioning something about, the fact that Jews seem to be the exception, to the being horrified about people being murdered and babies being killed.
Yeah.
Over the weekend, there was a Palestinian family in Chicago. Someone broke into their house and killed
Yes.
their son. The difference in
Horrific.
any of that, there are no Jewish groups who are going to be marching,
No, no,
celebrating.
these are not Jewish groups. This seems to have been some far right person exploiting the situation, but it's true. I just read an interview with a South Asian man in London who was literally attacked and warned that his head would be chopped off because he wasn't supporting the marching for the quote unquote free Palestine. And it, after pushing very hard and reporting to the police, they caught the person, and the person had a knife on them. And this is what I'm talking about. I hate to say this because this is the only way some people will listen. And it's also universalizing our suffering, which is a huge issue,
Mhm.
but it doesn't stop with us. Like, honestly, if Hamas and Iran had their way and the people of Israel were genocided from the river to the sea, and Palestine was quote unquote freed, I guarantee you they would not be free. They would still be completely overtaken by Hamas.
Mm.
And we see how Hamas treats them.
But let's not forget, most Palestinians are Sunni Muslims, and the Iranians hate those people.
Yes, yes, absolutely. This is an excuse for Islamists, for pan-Arabism, for jihadism, extremism. It's an excuse. When we are gone, no, we won't be gone. Am Israel Chai, we will never disappear. We are still here. All of those great ruling entities who in the past have tried to destroy us, they're gone. They're gone. So we will still survive this. Many losses, but we're still here. 2,000 plus years later, we are still here. Baruch Hashem. We're not going anywhere.
If there's anything you say about Jewish people, it's that we are survivors.
We are freaking survivors. We are resilient as hell. I don't want to say that. I don't want to have to say I'm resilient because I don't want to lose my health, energy, everything to stay alive and be resilient. I don't want to have to do this every
We don't
generation
want to
over and over again.
survive. We want to
No,
live.
exactly. Am Israel Chai, we just want to live, right? Okay. But my whole point is using and universalizing our experience, demeaning our experience. It's not going to free anybody. It's not going to free anybody who is the target of any form of hate or racism. You will not be freed by doing this to us. You will not be freed by staying ignorant, refusing to learn history, and letting your own personal experience, letting yourself project that experience emotionally onto something you do not know or understand, and you will not begin to understand for years if you only just started learning about it recently.
Exactly.
You will not be freed by doing that. All you will be doing is letting people exploit your pain and letting yourself stay ignorant fools.
I couldn't have put it better than that. And I can sense we're slowly moving towards a more positive outlook.
Yes,
I want to keep the
hopefully.
trend going. I think that for whatever reason, the United States in particular Jews have historically had it so well that maybe there's something about that that kind of isolates many American Jews, at least until now, from the horrors that go on. People are not looking, but having been in the Netherlands, I have to assume that the Jewish community there is much like in Canada or in the UK, where there's a greater level of solidarity with the Jewish people of Israel. I don't know if that's been your experience.
Yes and no. Yes, I agree with you. Relatively speaking, about the United States, relatively speaking, when we say we've had it better, because we have pockets of strong community, and it's the country that has the second largest population. And when I say that, I'm talking about 0.2% of the population in the United States. So that's nothing, but it's the second largest population of Jews around the world. And we have been concentrated mainly in New York and a couple other areas, right? So we've had that community, and because it is a faulted democracy, we have some of that democratic capability. And because of our hard work as a community, when we weren't allowed into universities, we created our own hospitals. It wasn't because we were privileged, it was because we were desperate, right? So I do agree with you that that experience and that hope of I remember my Bubba, my grandmother, telling me that she was told the streets in America were paved with gold. There was such a hope of rebuilding and finally being free from those hundreds of years of persecution, thousands, but talking about the Jewish community in what is now the Ukraine, who had only been there for a couple hundred years, having come from lots of other places, including Sephardic communities, but that's a whole other discussion. This hope that, okay, now we can finally breathe. And they didn't. Like I said, Red Scare, anti-Semitism, the Klan. My father, who moved from Brooklyn to Texas when he was little, had to deal with being beat up by white supremacists as a Jew. It wasn't that they were free, but it was a sense of hope that eventually, and this was better than pogroms in the shtetl, right? What I want to say about the Netherlands, to answer your question, is the community here is minuscule. And by that, I mean 90% of the Jews of the Netherlands, which used to have a significant, in terms of tiny Jewish population, but it was significant enough that even the Amsterdam dialect contains words that were loaned from various Jewish languages. Hebrew, Yiddish, Ladino, as examples. 90% were sent to camps with the help of the Dutch, either turning them in or handing over maps of where they lived, etc., to the Germans, or not rising up to stop the deportations. And the Dutch had their own concentration camp, which was a, let's say, quote unquote, stop on the way to being set to trains to be sent to everywhere from Auschwitz to Sobibor, etc. 90% sent to camps, 75% murdered in those camps. And the survivors who came back to the Netherlands, which were very few, came back to things like utility, mortgage, and rent bills of their houses that had been taken over by sympathists, Nazis, as well as Nazi sympathists, and who didn't pay any bills. and the municipalities, oh, this Jewish person is back from surviving camps. Here's bills for the, 3 years you were away, 2 years you were away, 1 year you were away, pay this. Nobody wanted them back. People blamed them for what happened. It's the same thing that we're seeing now. People are blaming Islamist extremism. They're blaming acts of terrorism, and they have been acts of terrorism that have taken place in Europe for decades now, on this conflict and on the Jews and Israel, and not on the terrorists. So to answer your question about the unity, it is a tiny community here, really tiny. One of the tiniest. The elimination and murder of the Jewish population was the highest in all of Western Europe during the Shoah and the Second World War. It is so tiny that the unity it's so hard to find. There are so few Jews in this country, it's hard to find them. It's hard for me to find them. What I can say, and here's moving to something positive, okay? Some of the organizations, the Jewish organizations here, are doing such beautiful work, and I will give an amazing example. So yesterday, there was a pro-Hamas rally in Dam Square, which is at the very middle of the center of Amsterdam. It was the whole thing, free Palestine from the river to the sea. There were jihad, Khyber al-Yahud chant, everything you can think of, right? And there were everybody who showed up on the left, Dutch people, everybody was there. It was big, it was loud, it was freaky, it was disturbing, it was unnerving. And Stand With Us NL, the organization, responded by hiring 3 helicopters who carried messages behind them. And it said, "Love hummus, not Hamas." Yeah. It said, I think something like, I am probably not quoting these all correctly, but like, make hummus, not war, or make falafel, not war, or something like this. And I really need to find, I want to quote these because it was such a beautiful action. You have to imagine these people gathering, this huge gathering, and then flying overhead the tiny Jewish community, and with help from Stand With Us NL. Yes. Oh, it says, "Love hummus, not Hamas, make falafel, not war, and shalom salam."
Oh, so
So
one
this is what we're talking about, unity. This tiny Jewish community and the tiniest little organization.
punching way above their weight.
Yes.
No, that's incredible. I like I said, we survive. And you mentioned just how bad it was in for the Dutch Jews of all of Western Europe during Shoah. And there it's actually, because I'm originally from Ottawa, Canada, Ottawa,
Yeah.
every year we actually get tulips delivered by the Queen of Holland,
Yeah.
because the Canadians were the ones who liberated the Netherlands and
Yes.
provided safe shelter for the Dutch.
That's right. The royal family, who, by the way, at the time, the prince, so the husband of the queen, it was recently discovered that he was actually part of the Hitler Youth. He was a member. They found a card from him, but that's a whole other story. They found his membership card. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of Canadians are happy when they see the tulips, but I always had mixed emotions, because that liberation did not come in time for our.
No. And the narrative around it is always, we saved the Jews. And not, it took us so damn long And we only entered because we didn't want to be taken over by the Germans.
Yeah.
When
And,
we finally realized we could be affected by this.
right.
Yeah.
The Roosevelt and Churchill administrations had intelligence of what was going on. They decided to bomb cities instead of bomb rail lines.
Yeah. 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 I know. Yeah. I mean, there's so much discussion to be had about the narrative. And what's also interesting about that is that non-Jews assume that this is the narrative. So they assume the quote unquote Jewish privilege that everybody joined the war to save you guys and nobody wants to save us. And I'm like, no, honey, we were collateral damage that they stumbled upon and they didn't care to listen to us when we were warning them.
The Normandy landings happened months after the Polish Jewish community was just gone.
Yeah. And the US turned away boats of us trying to come for safety, and not just the US. I mean, they're so, and then on the, I also want to talk about this idea of Ashkenormativity in the United States. It's a very complex issue. And this does tie into the discussion we're having about unity. It is 100% true, as I just explained in the beginning of this interview, that my Ashkenormative view of Israel and Jewish history completely colored my neutrality about Israel and my ignorance about the historical struggle of Mina Jews, Sephardic, Mizrahi, Beta Israeli, 100%. I also want to say is part of that is because the dominant, I don't even want to say dominant, the majority of Jews in the United States are Ashkenazi. So that's the culture that most Jews grew up in. I'm not excusing any ignorance that that culture fostered. I'm just stating a fact. There is also the reality that the view of Jews in the United States or in Canada or in Europe, the Ashkenormative view is also something we did not create. That Ashkenormative view is something the non-Jewish world has created and refuses to let go of. And when I say an Ashkenormative view, I mean it's a warped view of Ashkenazim. It is a caricature. It is dangerous to us as Ashkenazim, and it is dangerous to all Jewish people, because what it does is it allows for this narrative of saying Jews are white, Jews are European, Jews are colonizers. And in one fell swoop, erases the entire history and allows for this propaganda of what is happening in the conflict. This propaganda literally coming from Iran, terror groups, Hamas, Qatar, via Al Jazeera, via this group, that group, etc. It allows for that to grow and take place.
Yeah. And it obscures critical data that gets lost, which is that when you account for the Mizrahi Jewish and Arab Israeli population, Israel is majority non-white.
Well, and I would even go far as to say, listen, I am living in the Netherlands. I am not a white person here. That doesn't mean I'm claiming I'm Black. It doesn't mean anything. I'm a Jew, and I am not a white person in this country. I might be able to present myself with some privilege, and it's ambiguous. People aren't quite sure where I'm from. I walk down the street, I get people saying salam aleichem to me, Turkish, Moroccan, wherever. I get Dutch people continuing to ask me, where are you from? But where are you really from? But where are you really from? I get people screaming at me to go back to Morocco, go back to Turkey, blah, blah, blah. And on top of it, I walk down my street and I continuously come across plaques in front of houses that show this Jewish person lived here, they were born on this day, they were deported to Sobibor, Auschwitz, etc. On this day, they died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I am not Jewish. I mean, I'm sorry, I am Jewish. I am not a white person in this country. That doesn't mean I am not denying any form of passing privilege I have. I am not denying the capacity for me to absorb any kind of racist views of other cultures. That has nothing to do with it. And by the way, Middle Eastern Muslim communities around the world can absorb this. Indian people from Southeast Asia can absorb this. People from Asia can absorb this. It doesn't make them white. My passing is conditional. And the moment it is discovered that I am Jewish, I am in danger. And my passing is the same as any other Middle Eastern person with Middle Eastern ethnicity who walks down the street without wearing any signifiers of their background. Take away a hijab, take away an accent, my passing is the equivalent, whether they are from Iran, Turkey, Morocco, Palestine, Syria, it doesn't matter. My passing is the same because all people from the ethnic area that our people come from look as diverse as we do and the same as we do. And I want to move this back to this beautiful idea that you said, unity. There's two things I want to discuss. One is this, we recently, not so long ago, experienced Tish B'Av a few months ago, which for those who don't know is when Jews mourn the destruction of the first temple. That was one of the first experiences we had of people trying to ethnically cleanse us from our homeland and destroy us, right? And on this day, lots of things take place, but a lot of us read some of the most heartbreaking, depressing liturgy of mourning. And one of the things that that Tish B'Av teaches us is that baseless hatred of each other will leave us vulnerable to our destruction. And Tish B'Av reminds us of our need for unity.
And which is why I want to, I guess maybe we'll wrap up with stories that I've heard of just incredible, acts of solidarity. There was a story just from New York City that an Orthodox Jew was standing behind the counter, the LL counter at JFK. He offered to pay the flights of anyone who had a summons by the IDF.
Yeah.
He ended up paying for
250,000. Yeah, I thought it was $250,000 that he wound up paying.
Wow.
Something like this. I don't quote me. I have to look it up again. But yeah. These acts of love for each other are crucial. I mean, I've been contacting anyone and everyone I know of who is in Israel right now, letting them know that I want them to be safe, that I love them, that I care about them. And people I just casually even know on the internet and friends and family that I know. I am making it a point to let them know because there's so much out there and literally violence that they are still experiencing of the world telling them they are hated and and they our family in Israel need to hear that they're loved and valued.
There was another story like very early on where apparently
Yeah.
over the weekend, Brandenburg Square in Berlin was lit up
Mm-hmm.
in the Israeli flag. And one
Mm.
of my friends on Twitter said, I kind of wish Hitler could wake up for 5 minutes just
Oh
to see
man.
that.
Oh, I kind of wish anyone with Nazi sympathies, and I say that term because we all know that the Nazis also infiltrated and recruited in the Middle East. Um, Anyone with those sympathies sees that. It probably will trigger the hell out of them, but I don't care. I don't care. Trigger
Okay.
away, trigger
Yeah.
away. There's something I want to quote the American Israeli stand-up comic Modi. I don't know if you know of him. I'm sorry, I don't know his last name, but recently or a few weeks ago, a few months ago on his podcast, he's always talking about Moshiach energy. I love that phrase. I love it. It's like our purpose in life is to find Moshiach energy and like absorb Moshiach energy and exude Moshiach energy. I love that. And this is coming from someone raised secular. But there's something amazing that he said on his podcast where I was like, this man, he may be a stand-up comic, but he's a rabbi. He said, he said, the Shema, when it says Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, he said, it's not just that it's saying there's only one God. He's saying God is in oneness. Hashem is in oneness. Adonai is in oneness, unity. And when he said that, I was floored because that is exactly what we have to say and heed and listen to every day as Jews. Every day, do not forget that our purpose is unity.
I don't think I can end this podcast on a better note than this.
Right? So
Um,
beautiful.
yeah. Sarah, honestly, thanks for coming on. Please let everyone know where they can follow you.
Okay, yeah. You can follow me on Twitter where I'm ranting and raving and cursing at the moment because my stages of grief are going between rage and despair. But my original Twitter handle was hijacked by some Islamist who was trying to get money out of me. So I am now at Twitter at LittleBigMouth, and that's spelled LID as in yeah, as in I don't know, dumpling. LIDDLE, not TT, Little Big Mouth one with a number one, Little Big Mouth one. You can also find me on TikTok, where I am not so active right now because I am really not into making myself more depressed. But I am on TikTok, where you can find me as Little with a T as in terrific, Little Big Mouth Zero. That's
And
where I am.
I encourage you to follow her. I'm not on TikTok.
Don't
I
go, don't do it.
yeah, personally, I don't like being
Don't
spied
do
on
it.
by the CCP.
No, exactly.
I am on Twitter at Red
It's a
Hill John,
dumpster fire.
and
Sorry.
I am on Twitter at Red Hill John, and I'm probably gonna we'll see how long I'm still on there. I don't know what
Yeah,
what's gonna do to the site next, but
yeah,
we're both gonna be talking about this over the coming weeks. Um,
yeah,
or anything like us,
yes,
things are gonna feel weird for a while.
yeah,
The last time I remember feeling anything like this was the summer of 2014 when the those three boys were kidnapped, and then there was a whole nother war in Gaza at the time.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, I think but I do have optimism that when this is all over, something better is going to emerge out of
Amen.
all of this.
Amen. Baruch Hashem, Bezrat Hashem, 100%. And that will not be without horrific tragedy, as we all know. But again, one thing is, if you look past at our history, every time devastation and tragedy has taken place, we have picked up and built ourselves to be even stronger and to create even more beautiful things.
Ken Yehi Ratzon.
Yeah.